Alright, I'm going to give my bit on Antennagate, as it's called. It is like beating a dead horse at this point. But that horse keeps on getting up, and article after article, blog after blog, and news report keep trying to keep this story alive. I will premise this by saying, sure, part of this video is going to piss off a lot of Apple fans, but at the same time, some of it is also going to have their support. First and foremost, this would not really be a big story if it weren't for the infamous Steve Jobs emails. You're holding it wrong. Just get a case. These kinds of things. Of course, all that was under debate. Nonetheless, it was traced to Apple itself. We can leave it to the mythos of Apple, and we may never know. Personally, I don't care. Nonetheless, it did just... that's what started it all. Is there an issue? Yep. There sure is. I've demonstrated it. Several iPhone 4s have been tested and consistently do the same thing. Is it overblown? I would say in some ways, yes it is. But not in some of the aspects that many people argue. So, my main reference is this all kicks off primarily because of the emails. And I go back to the iPhone 3G to support that point. The iPhone 3G had major reception issues. Period. I believe that the iPhone 3G's issues were, at the time, far worse than the iPhone 4. And I own the iPhone 3G. And yes, the iPhone 3G made a lot of headlines. And no bumpers were given out, and there were no return programs whatsoever. And here are some of the headlines. Drop calls plague iPhone 3G, and not just in the US. iPhone 3G. Full of signal, but drops calls. 4 tips to reduce drop calls with the iPhone 3G. Again, what's behind the iPhone 3G glitches? Inside the iPhone 3G complaints. iPhone 3G, what's the frequency? Infineon chip causing dropped calls on iPhone 3G. Is Apple shooting in the dark, fixing iPhone 3G issues? Behind the iPhone software to reduce dropped calls. So those are just a few of the many headlines that were out there for the iPhone 3G. And let me tell you guys, it got so bad. I couldn't make calls that lasted longer than 15 minutes on average. Sometimes it would be 5 minutes, what have you. And here's my own complaint to Apple on the support forums. It seems that the iPhone, with the exception of its introduction of the original, at least from what I have seen on the 3G, I've never owned a 3GS, but there have always been really reception issues. So is the iPhone really just the same? Is it really equal in terms of what its reception woes are versus other smartphones? No. Yes, there are smartphones that you can degrade the signal. It's obvious out there. The consistency of the iPhone has been already demonstrated. And I know people throw around these numbers. 0.55% have complained. Oh, it's just 2% here, and so on and so forth. Problem with these numbers is that it just goes off of a sampling, and it assumes that every person is going to complain and or return the iPhone. And that's just not the case. I bet you tons of people are just saying, hey, it's AT&T, or it's a fact of life, or I don't really want to cause waves. I'm not going to go there and complain, things and that. After all, I never really returned my iPhone 3G. I had really just waited it out and tried to find ways and to make it work for me. Until that patch came along that did reduce drop calls. The drop calls never went away with my iPhone 3G. One of the major reasons why I did end up selling it. I mean, after all, if we're going to start talking about numbers, I could bring up all kinds of numbers, and depending on the source, like an article that states Verizon is gaining on AT&T, and how AT&T went from 45% to 40%, and how Verizon went from 20% to 26%. I can then go on and say, well, if we're going to take 0.55% of 3 million, that equals several hundred complaints a day. Could also use HTC's percent of complaint for the Droid Iris at 0.016. And let's just say we don't even know the total amount of Droid Irises sold. So going off of the HTC Magic, which was just T-Mobile, sold 1 million. Let's say over this amount of months period of time, they sold 1.5 million. And we'll reduce Apple down to just 1.5 million iPhones. And then cut that percent in half. You still have on margin far more complaints for the iPhone versus the HTC models. But then again, it's just numbers out there. The question is, do they really say much? Yes and no. But nonetheless, let's move on from just numbers. People ask, well, what's the big deal? Like I said, I attribute one to the emails. The other is, basically, Jobs goes on to say, hey, look at these 3 lines. You know, it's not very much like what Apple would do. But this is part of some brilliant engineering. That this brilliant engineering is that the steel band is, in fact, part of the antenna system. That it's never been done before, and hey, it's really cool engineering. I mean, the major blooper that occurred with the 3GS demonstration on the web versus the iPhone 4, the 3GS actually did obtain connections and publish the web pages faster than the iPhone 4. Nonetheless, you have these quotes and things like that. Brilliant engineering, best antenna ever, and post this Antennagate, or somewhere in the middle, Apple admits to having more dropped calls. Whatever the margin may be, small or large, more dropped calls in the 3GS. So you logically have this outcome that is supposed to be better, but on the other side of the equal sign, the elements to make it so simply aren't there. The iPhone 4, admitted by Apple, no matter the margin of percent, has more drop calls than the 3GS. Take from it what you will, flame me, what have you, but that does not make for brilliant engineering, what so have you. I mean, the iPhone 4 should have way less drop calls than the iPhone 3GS. Of course, there's all these other lab tests that go and say, well, in lower areas it's picking up this, but in areas over here it's not doing better than the 3GS, but yet over here it is a little bit better than the 3GS. Brilliant engineering? Or it's just spin. Who knows? Now for the flip side of the coin. So there's a bug. It's provable. On margin it is worse than other smartphones. Is it a deal breaker? No. Is it the first time that tech's going to have a bug? No. Is it the first time that Apple has some sort of flaw in their hardware? No. It's just a fact of life. These things happen. Okay. I can move on from it. I went through the whole 3G issue. My wife's got the iPhone 4. She's doing fine on it with the whole case and bit and stuff like that. A case didn't solve my problem. I had full signal strength and yet a drop call and drop of a hat. But what really irks me is I watched that press conference. And the press had the audacity to ask Jobs for an apology. I mean, is this Sesame Street? I was just overwhelmed with, like, if I had a baseball bat, I'd just smack the dude. So are you going to apologize? Huh? I mean, please, people. Shall I break out the violins and the drama of it all? Holy cow. What I expected out of the press conference was something similar to that they've done with other products. That Apple has extended a return period. You can swap it out. You may can get a credit of some sort. What have you. And because they've done all these things in different parts in different periods of time and for different products. I did not expect the bumpers. And you know what? I don't agree with giving away free bumpers. I just don't. I mean, please, people. There are plenty out there that seem to get along fine without a case on the iPhone 4. My wife's iPhone With the case, a whole lot better. So what? I'll tell you what. I want a bumper for all of the pain and misery and suffering, 24-hour shifts, just late nights, ordering pizza, for all of the problems that I've experienced in IT, for a gamut of products and software companies and hardware companies, with probably Microsoft being at the top. If I had a bumper for all of the money lost from those experiences, I could feel this entire study from the floor to ceiling with bumpers. So where are my bumpers for all that hell that I went through? Please, people. I just think it's just crazy how far it has gone, and that's the part I'll say, well, is how it's being overblown. Where would you go? Where do you go from here as a blogger or a press? You, for crying out loud, got an apology. You're getting way more than what is the norm. A free bumper, an extra return policy. To me, it's case closed. I mean, I can't say that Apple went well above and beyond what I expected they would do, and I was stunned at what I saw in the press conference, from demanding apologies to free bumpers and whatnot. I disagreed with Apple singling out manufacturers, because that can only come back to bite them. Like the HTC can publish their numbers as well, and it may not work out favorably as Apple would have hoped. They could have just stuck to what they had and said, yep, we're not perfect. Here it is. Here's the plan. Thank you. Have a nice day. And then, of course, recall, recall, recall. Let me tell you something, folks. Recalls, for the majority of the time, involve a safety issue. So, I have not heard of iPhone 4s exploding, blowing someone's ears off, or puncturing a hole in someone's leg and pocket, or setting a house on fire. Until then, you're not going to have a recall. I mean, so yeah, there's going to be a whole lot of that overblown in that. Oh, those that hate Apple always say, oh, well, they're elitists. They think everything they build is perfect. And so therefore, when there is a mistake, you see, you're not perfect. That kind of thing. Look, you're not perfect. And then, of course, there will be people that, if they will milk a story and milk a story, Oh, they're getting $1 million in the bank. The drama, the drama, the drama. Good Lord. Now, for a bit of sarcasm here, for all those fancy testing labs out there, to test the antenna and the Wi-Fi and the 3G and all this other stuff, I gotta tell you about my own, the Mr. Bit antenna testing labs. Low cost, don't have to have rooms filled with foam and chairs that spin, what have you. Just nothing but real life. Because we test out and
went outside.
One in the car! Oh yeah! One pumping gas.
When putting on your seatbelt.
5 bars.
When it's drizzling. In the frozen section, still 5 bars. See, our testing is very thorough. Inside a cooler, still 5 bars. There isn't a place we won't test to see if we get a signal. As of right now, still 5 bars. When at the post office. Rest assured, using our proven and guaranteed methods, you will never, ever experience an Antennagate.